Everyone, good evening, visionary woman. Thank you so much, Eva, and everyone for having me this evening. I believe all of us are very familiar with, friends of, have family members, or we ourselves can identify as Mary and or Martha, right? So I grew up hearing about Mary and Martha before I even understood the entirety of the story. My mom, she would say she's Mary and my aunt is Martha. So give you a little bit of background. My aunt, she's a very great homemaker. She's a great cook. She loves to plan, manage family events. And during those events, she's always very busy. She's cleaning, she's tidying, she's preparing, she's hosting, she's serving at these events. While my mother, who I'm going to say is not domesticated at all, she's always sitting down, enjoying the company, enjoying the friendships, enjoying the fellowship, right, with people at these events. So today I really wanted to talk about these two women because I've been hearing about them all my life. So I'm going to be talking about them not from the perspective of a T Martha or a T Mary. I'm sure you guys have probably heard that. There are like some women who say, I'm a T Martha, or I'm a T Mary. We're not going to be comparing, tonight. So I do pray tonight that God will use me and anoint me. I hope I'll be able to bless someone out there, even not tonight, hopefully in the future. So we're going to be, talking a little bit more about, Luke 10:38-42. So this is basically the main story of Mary and Martha. There's other scriptures that the Bible do refer to them, but we're going to start off by talking about Luke 10:38-42. So I'm reading from the King James Version. Now it came to pass as they went that he entered into a certain village, and a certain woman named Martha received him into her house. And she had a sister called Mary, which was also sat. So the Bible said, which also sat at his feet and heard his word. But Martha was cumbered about much serving and came to him and said, Lord, dost not care that my sister hath left me to serve alone? Bid her therefore that she will help me. And Jesus answered, I'm sure he answered gently and quietly, and said to her, Martha, Martha, thou art careful and troubled about many things, but one thing is needful, and Mary hath chosen that good part, which will not be taken away from her. So let's just get into that context, right? So basically, we know from this story here that Jesus knew Martha and Mary. But when you read John 11 and also John 12, verse 1-8, we basically found out that Jesus actually were friends of Mary and Martha and Lazarus. We know that Mary and Martha, Jesus would visit their house, right, on a regular basis, because the scripture did talk about this, where Martha's house was in Bethany. And for those of you who have been to Israel, you will know that Bethany is pretty close to Jerusalem. So there are like many scholars who have stated that there was like a legal distance walking from Bethany to Jerusalem. So if there's any kind of like festivity or Sabbath, it was okay for a Jew to walk from Bethany to Jerusalem. So obviously then Jesus basically stayed at Martha's house whenever he was staying in Jerusalem, or whenever there's going to have some kind of, festivity or the Sabbath. So this is telling me that this home, right, where Jesus stayed belonged to Martha. I don't know if Martha was a widow. The Bible doesn't say, but I know that this is her home, and probably this house that she has was probably a very large home, because we know that Jesus, he would not only travel with himself, but he also traveled with an entourage of folks, right? He traveled with a lot of people. So I'm just saying, based on what I'm reading, that she was probably very stable, Martha. She was a homeowner. And obviously, if you're a homeowner and you're stable, it's your responsibility to prioritize your guests, right? So you're going to want to make sure that your guests are comfortable, everybody's fed, everybody's well taken care of. But while Martha was very busy with the preparations, which was needed because she was the host, Mary, her sister, was just sitting at Jesus's feet, listening to his teaching, right? And so Martha became very frustrated and upset that she was doing all the work while her sister Mary was sitting and soaking into Jesus's teaching. So my question is, where would you be? Would you be at Jesus's feet, having your devotion, studying the word, fellowshipping with him? Or Would you be getting stuff done by serving Jesus and others, leading and ensuring that every I have a dot, right? Every T has a cross? Are you able to identify where would you be? So the next thing is that, so Martha, Jesus approached Martha and said, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? I would have said that. Tell her, Lord, to come and help me. And Jesus responded, Martha, Martha, you are worried, anxious, and upset about many things, but one thing is needed, and Mary has chosen what is better, and I will not take it from her. So therefore, it's not wrong to serve, right? I think serving others is a good thing. And I think a lot of people, probably a lot of us, our love language is serving, right? Just act of serving. And act of serving is a devotion for many of us, right? Because we have different gifts, and many of us love to serve, but it should not come at the expense of your spiritual growth and learning from him. It is very important to prioritize worship and reading his word over work and service, both of which are good, but a balance and prioritization is important. It doesn't matter how busy our lives become, make sure it does not rob of our private time at Jesus's feet. So I'm going to do a little bit of comparison now. I didn't want to, but this is not about Team Mary or Team Martha. So we know that Martha is a doer. She's probably a type A personality. She's performance driven. She's very active. And Mary on the other side is quiet. She's probably a good listener. She loves to invest in relationships, right? I see this. And for the scripture, Luke 10, 38 to 42, in this particular case, Martha, however, was a little more concerned about physical bread versus Mary. She was more concerned with her spiritual bread. So you want to make sure that you're more physical bread is important, but you always want to put that spiritual bread over the physical bread. So now I'm going to get into a little bit more. I'm reading the scriptures here, where we're looking at John 11. And we're going to be talking a little bit about Lazarus's death. So we see in 11 verse 17, on his arrival, Jesus found Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now, Bethany, as I said, was pretty close to Jerusalem. And many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in their loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, right? I told you about her. She was a doer. She went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. She was a little bit more quiet, more reserved. And Lord, right? Martha said, Lord, to Jesus. She knew that Jesus was her Lord. If you had been here, my brother would have not died. But I know that even though God will give you whatever you ask. And then Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. And Martha answered, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. And he asked her, do you believe this? And she said, yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one is to come into this world, right? So we see here that although Martha was busy and a doer, she knew God. She knew exactly who he was. So I wanted to just show this part about Martha. And then the Bible, kept on going on saying regarding now Mary, we're looking at verse 28. And she said this, she went back and called her sister Mary. So obviously Martha was probably the older one. She was a little bit more responsible, right? She was more, as I said, a doer, probably in charge. It was her home. And she basically went and she got Mary. And Mary got up quickly. And now Jesus had not entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. So Martha went to Jesus, not Mary. Mary actually stayed back. And when the Jews who had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been there, my brother would not have died. So she basically asked the same question like Martha, but she fell at Jesus's feet. So she was always at Jesus's feet. And when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also saw her weeping, he was deeply moved in the spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, Lord. So basically what happened, when Jesus saw that she was crying, right? He basically felt troubled. He felt really sad because she was crying. So that emotional side actually spoke to Jesus's heart, right? So we noticed that. And then the story goes on. But what I wanted to talk a little bit more about is that even like after that, and we saw where she was basically in John 12, 1-8, where it was 6 days before the Passover, and Jesus was at Martha's home, and Lazarus was there, and Lazarus was reclining at the table. And then Mary took out a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume, and she poured it on Jesus's feet and wiped his feet with her hair. So it goes to show that she just had so much admiration for Jesus. She was just so emotional. She was just so tuned into the presence of God, right? And we've seen this over and over with Mary, where she always kind of put relationship first, always put Jesus first, versus like Martha, she knows God, she loves God. She knows who the Messiah is. And she was a doer. And she was obviously the leader. And because of that, you can see her kind of taking on that responsibility and leading and serving. But we see where sometimes too, this leading and serving can sometimes make you overwhelmed, right? And she was very overwhelmed, where we saw that in Luke 10, 38-42, where just things of this world, life within itself can be very overwhelming. And if you're focused too much on life, too much on doing, too much on getting things done, you can definitely miss out at Jesus' feet. You can miss out on that devotion. You can miss out on that one-on-one time. You can also miss out too on that empathy. Jesus, yes, have empathy and compassion for us, but because she was so emotional, she was able to cry and weep, right? Where Martha was obviously probably a little bit more stern and strong and so forth. But it's okay. This is telling us it's okay to have that balance as well. Yes, you have to serve, but it's okay to be emotional. It's okay to pour your soul, your spirit to Jesus, right? It's very important that we do that. And then now I want to do a little bit of comparison and then just end. So we see where Martha was bold, she was courageous, and she was also honest with Jesus about his lateness, right? I think a lot of us can identify ourselves with Martha. And then I said Mary was very emotional. She loved Jesus just as Martha, but she was just so attuned to her emotions, and she practiced the presence, right? A lot of us, we're working on that, to always be present, not to be multitasking and too busy. And I think Mary just mastered that. But overall, both sisters had faith and trust in God, and they demonstrated it in different ways. Martha is more spoken, more practical, as I said, while Mary is more emotional and less reactive. Martha's service and Mary's profound act of worship demonstrate the different ways in which believers can honor and serve God. So their story basically emphasized the importance of understanding the balance between practical service and spiritual devotion. We should at all times prioritize Jesus above all things.